we know that Ant is going to have more moments where, all of this stuff is the stakes raised here. It's like, okay, how does he close? How does he close? And we'll see how it goes. But Rudy's been around, Cat's been around, Conley's obviously been around for a while. But I want to focus on Rudy here because the two camps are never going to see the other side of it. I just saw the plus minus differential stuff that came out where Rudy's like the most impactful player for the Timberwolves so far. I think he had the ball way too much in game 7. It won't matter because they won and he hit the ridiculous shot clock shot. He had another one out of his hands where I don't even know how it went in. But there's always this divide with him. And considering the matchup is a lot different now based on like what his assignment will be, I just wonder what you see with him right now and your expectations for him against Dallas.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a little bit of a different challenge here against Dallas with his impact defensively. Offensively with Rudy, I don't think there's anything ever you can consistently pencil in, exactly what you're going to get. So whatever, we'll see about that end of the floor. They've got a couple of young, bouncy, athletic guys in there that are going to be competing and contesting and just act with their activity. They're quicker off their feet. Like they're going to be fine battling Rudy Gobert, Lively, and Gafford. The other end of the floor is a different challenge for Rudy Gobert. In the last series, he was able to kind of hover along the baseline. I mean, Aaron Gordon took 5 shots in that game. Aaron Gordon is critical for Denver, and he was a complete non-factor offensively because they just, Towns, they made this decision. Towns is going to guard Jokic more. And you got to guard him, start with those possessions out on the perimeter more. And then sometimes you end up in the post at the end of those possessions, but you usually start out on the perimeter with Jokic. And they're just going to let Rudy then just go ahead, camp out, keep an eye on Gordon lurking and just, be there and wreak havoc and take away spacing. And that's what he did. That's not what's going to happen in this series. Like your challenge now with Luka Doncic and the way he is the best I've ever seen at the late find. When it looks like he's taking himself into a tough spot, it's crowded. He leaves his feet. Here comes the one guy is draped on him usually, and now here comes Gobert, and here comes this perfectly thrown lob. At the exact time that Gobert leaves his feet to come help, here comes a lob around him, over him, a drop-off, whatever, to make Lively and Gafford an offensive threat at the rim and make you pay for that. He also is great at the late find, at those opposite side of the court darts that he throws for threes to the corners, typically. That's another issue for Gobert. He's not going to have some dude down there lurking around on the baseline that he can guard. Because even though Jokic is this incredibly versatile offensive player, he still gravitates toward the paint and the rim as the possessions get further and further. Like they're going to be, that's not the case. And Gordon's down there. That's not the case with Dallas. You don't have another guy down there that just sort of camped out where Gobert's not going to pay a price by being able to help on the drive and also be a factor against that guy. There is no guy like that for Dallas. Those guys are spaced out at the 3-point line. So Luka is going to be the guy that's controlling all of this and reading Gobert, and Gobert's going to have more ground to cover. He's going to have more difficult decisions to make in this series than he did in the Denver series. And that's going to be a fascinating part of this, and that is where my eye is going to be leaning, and my touch screens I'm doing with Scott after are going to be leaning in that direction. I want to see the extent to which this is a more difficult series for Rudy Gobert to defend and stay on the floor and be an impact player on that end, as opposed to the Denver series.
Yeah, I mean, Jokic eating him up in the post, it was always a little interesting to see Jokic go harder at Gobert when that was the assignment, even though Towns is the primary assignment, and then it's the Rudy Gordon thing that we've talked about. And like you could see it in the regular season. Okay, they want to keep him in the dunker. So now it's up to Aaron Gordon to be spaced out more, but he's not that kind of player. And he's a complete no-show in 7. And now Rudy's like, I don't even have to worry about him now. Because at that point, and I wonder if Denver got away from that a little bit, being up 20, thinking, okay, well, maybe we don't need to have Gordon bring it up as much. And Murray's cooking in the first half. So, I know there was some different things they were doing to try to get Murray going. And that's the questions I'm sure they'd be asking themselves all summer with that part of it. But I don't know if it'll be the same thing that we saw when the Clippers came back against the Jazz and Rudy, where I thought that part of the criticism for him was unfair because he was having to cover the corner and then also retreat back to the rim. And it was like Terrence Mann, it was an absurd, but it might be PJ Washington where, well, no,
Or
look, they're
Derek
just going to have
Jones?
him on Lively. Yeah, they're just going to have him on Lively, though. They're going to have him in Lively, and they're going
Right.
to run a lot of 1-5, and then it's going to be up to him. I would say, as far as a big and his ability, the best part of Rudy is finding a way to stay in front, because Luka's not the super, super quick guy. He just wears you down with his hip and the drive and that late find that you're talking about. So, Rudy's not going to get stuck in the corner on PJ, because I'd imagine that's the cat assignment. And even though I was worried about the Durant-Towns matchup in that series, Durant didn't really make Cat pay all that much. It wasn't this obvious mismatch, even though athletically you'd think it would be. So it sounds like you're leaning Dallas a little bit here overall.
I am. And look, I've been, looking at all of these different ways that these teams operate, and I do like Dallas a lot. Now, a big factor for me is Luka, how close to like normal he looks, because I don't think he looks normal. I think he's never going to play quick, but some nights he's way more decisive and he's moving better. And I don't think he's been moving great in the playoffs overall. And then at some point, I feel like in every game, something happens where he ends up on the floor and he gets up and he's gimping around a little bit. And so his ability, and it's not like he's got great separation ability off the dribble, but it's good. It's better when he's fully healthy. So that's a factor for me. I'm going to be watching. But here's one of the things that I took into consideration when I started thinking, man, I really kind of like Dallas' ability to control their end of the floor offensively against this defense. The matchup against Luka, Lou Dort has the number one quality that you need to guard Luka, which is physical strength. Because Luka is hitting you with shoulders and elbows, and he's letting you ride his hip, and he's not getting knocked off balance because his base is so wide and he's just so strong. He doesn't have a lot of muscle definition. He's kind of like Jokic in that way. It's kind of funny because you can't identify a bicep if you look at these guys, but yet nobody can, they're not affected by anybody. That's how strong they are. Dort is one of the strong, and by Luka's own admission, he's so sick of seeing Lou Dort. He's so glad to move on from this series. Dort has the physical strength to not give ground when Luka is trying to bully you with his shoulder and his hip and his forearm on that offhand, and getting you back on your heels so he can get into that little separation lean back. And not only by three, but like that 16, 18 footer that he loves to shoot. Dort wasn't giving ground. Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, he's pretty solidly put together. They're not on the caliber of Lou Dort in terms of strength. You're going to see a different level of separation for Luka by bullying those guys with his strength. It's going to be a little bit different. And that to me was, when I really looked at everything, I started to look at that. Okay, now let's just talk about Luka. Who's guarding Luka and the effect on Luka? Because I know Dort did affect him with his inability to get the space he wanted. And he didn't have the lift when he did get space because it was because of his leg. I think that he's going to have an easier time with these guys than he had with Dort. And if that's the case and he's getting better separation and he's feeling more confident in his separation, I think you're going to see a more efficient shooting series out of Luka. And again, the lob threat in the 1-5 pick and roll with Gobert trying to provide what he needs with these shows and like kind of sliding and like the soft hedge that you're going to see a lot of. He's not jumping out on a hard hedge on Luka Doncic. That's a nightmare for him to get back to the rim. So you're going to see these soft hedges where he's kind of sliding with Luka while the guard's continuing to get back, and then he's going to leave him and run back to the rim. Luka picks guys like that apart with his lobs timed perfectly to the guy that set the screen running to the rim, to the opposite side kick out. Like I said, the pocket pass that he can hit guys with. Gobert is going to be in a no-man land situation a lot in this series because he is going to be the primary 1-5 pick and roll defender for what you said. Cat will be the guy more on Jones and Washington. Gobert is going to be directly involved in these ball screens with a guy that is much more lethal than Jamal Murray was anytime you wanted to put him in a 1-5. This is going to be a different animal for Gobert to have to defend, and Luka typically makes great reads in that situation and beating you when you try to defend that. So a lot of this comes down to how I feel about Luka being able to operate in this series against this elite level defense, and I think he's going to be pretty good, pretty comfortable.